basically what we said last week is that moving forward, change, forward momentum, progress, all of those things are a given for us here in the world. Like, that's not something we get to negotiate. We always have change and forward momentum as a part of our life. Whether that's with our family, there's change and there's progress, and we see it happening all the time. Some of you who have young children, eventually they're going to leave elementary school, they're going to go into middle school, they're going to get to that point where they get into high school, and then you're going to be saying goodbye to them, and your little tiny baby who you love so much and who depends on you for everything is one day going to say bye-bye and take the keys from your wall and walk out the house, right? So there is change that is inevitable in our lives. It happens in our families, happens in organizations, happens in our community. We see our community changing. It even happens in our church. And this scares us sometimes because the truth is we don't know which changes we should be making because we don't have the benefit all the time of hindsight when it comes to change. Change just sort of happens automatically to us, and sometimes we get it right and sometimes we get it wrong. Anybody ever had one of those wrong moments of change in your life? Like, it just occurs. But in this series, what we wanted to do as we talk about that forward momentum and going forth is we want to talk about 4 key changes that if we will make these changes in our lives, we will know we're investing in something good. That's why we've said each week, kind of this series bottom line for us, what changes are key for the changes that we want to see. We want to look at the 4 key changes that need to be made in our lives so that we can see real change in the world around us. Now, last week, and again, I'm not going to go too much into this, but we started with ourselves. Because for me, that's the most important area any of us can start, because me is the only thing that I definitely can change. Right? I want to change my spouse all the time. I want to change other people in my life all the time. I want to shake my sibling and be like, just don't do that anymore, right? All the time. I would love to do that. Truth is, I can't do that. Right? I could slap my sister across the face, not going to change, right? The truth is, I can only change me. And so in thinking about this, if we're talking about change with people, we should always start with me and what I can do in that regard. But at some point in time, we have to move from the me to the we. We have to take another step in this process towards change. And here's why I know this. Because the truth to live true to yourself, which is what we talked about last week, we said that real change will happen when we as individuals decide, I don't want to live divided anymore. I don't want to live one way on the inside and my external world look like another thing. I want to bring those two things in concert together. Before we ever can get to the point of changing our society, we have to change that about us. And that's a bold and courageous and amazing decision. That's an empowering decision. Some of you made some courageous decisions this week to say, I'm not going to live divided anymore. I'm going to live the way that I am on the inside, on the outside. Like, I'm going to bring those two worlds together. But somewhere close behind, and this is always the case, somewhere very close behind our decision to live divided no more is loneliness. And here's why I know this. Because shortly after we make that bold and courageous decision, there's always a question that follows it. It's a question, whenever we say something really bold, we always follow it up with this. Is it just me? Right? Or we may start a sentence that way. Anybody ever done that? Is it just me, or has the entire world gone crazy? Like, is it just me, or have our politicians lost their minds? Is it just me, or has every athlete in America just gone nuts? Like, am I the only one that thinks this? Is that right? And we ask this question. This is curious about this question. If I were to say to you, yes, you are the only one, shut up. Like, that would be devastating, wouldn't it? That would be horrible. Why? Because when we ask that question, is it just me, we really don't anticipate that it is just me, do we? We really hope and pray that there's somebody else out there who is alongside of us. In our courageous decisions, we don't want to sit alone. It may be one of the most courageous decisions we've ever made. Is it just me, or is anybody else at the job just like really fed up with what's going on? And we get to this point where we're like, I'm done. I'm finished with that. I can't live into that reality anymore. I have to change things about my world. We make that statement, is it just me? And we're hoping, even if this was a career change or whatever, you're hoping that you can look back over your shoulder, see someone else at the job who's like, yeah, that was the right move for you. Yeah, I felt the same way. Yeah, I've been experiencing the same thing. Because when we say, is it just me, we don't really want it to be just me. We can't possibly imagine that we're alone in this. And the truth is we don't want to be alone. And here's why. Because independence can often lead to isolation. That's the first step. Independence can often lead to isolation. And when we become too isolated, anybody remember, here's Johnny? Like some of you older ones who watch that movie, you know what I'm talking about. This isolation leads to insanity, doesn't it? We get to this point where we think, and in the purest sense of the term insanity, we think we're not healthy. If I'm the only one who's thinking this, if I'm the only one who's feeling this, my independence, this bold and courageous move to stand alone despite anybody else, can lead me down a path of isolation. And that path towards isolation will eventually, if unchecked by other people and not verified by other people in our life, will lead us to think we're insane. And that's where the story kind of picks up today. I mean, you heard this same pattern even in the story that we talked about today. As Seth was reading this incredible story of Elijah, Elijah is actually, in chapter 19, just coming down from an incredibly courageous moment. In fact, we don't have the time to read chapter 18, but I would encourage you, sometime this week, go back, 1 Kings chapter 18. Just read the incredible, courageous moment of Elijah. It was Elijah against 450 prophets who disagreed with him. Elijah is standing alone. He's making a declaration that God is the real God. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the only true God to be worshiped and served and honored. And he's doing that in front of 450 other dudes who don't care, who don't believe him, who thinks he's off his rocker. But Elijah decides to do this incredibly bold thing. And the truth is, that's kind of his gig. Like Elijah was called to be a prophet of God. And if you don't know what a prophet is, that's a person whose entire job is just to proclaim the truth to the nation. Like that's what they're supposed to do. They have to go out. They don't care who it is. They don't care what feelings get hurt when they say it. They just have to proclaim the truth, period. So you'd kind of think Elijah gets this. Like this is his gig. He's going to be bold. He's going to be courageous. He's going to have these empowering moments because that's his job. That's what he does. But sometimes, whenever you got to tell the truth, these situations get really, really hostile. If you've ever had that moment where you had to confront a family member with the truth that maybe they don't want to see, that gets hostile, doesn't it? Sometimes if you want to confront someone on your job, or if you're the employer who has to confront one of your employees, you know these situations get hostile because you've got to bring up some level of truth that nobody wants to see and nobody wants to recognize, and that puts you in this situation of standing alone. And it's great, and you're courageous for doing it, but you and I both know that the moment that you do that, it's an incredibly isolating feeling. Because now it's me against everyone else. It's me against everyone in my family, or it's me against everyone on my job, or it's me against everyone in my community. Like, I just feel kind of isolated and alone, and that right there gets tiring after a while. That right there becomes really difficult, and that's exactly what Elijah was experiencing. As we get to the beginning of chapter 19, we see this moment in the first couple verses where Queen Jezebel, who's the one who he kind of fought against, she's got all the power, and she turns on him. She's like, look, be it on my head if in the next 24 hours you don't find Elijah dead. Like, that's a pretty serious threat. He's like, okay, I was bold. Don't want to lose my life over this. And I love what happens. I don't know if you picked up on this in verse 3. He just cuts to the chase. Queen Jezebel comes down on him, and immediately it says, Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. Like he got the heck out of town. He didn't look back. He didn't try to stop. He just moved. As fast as he could, he got out of town. And the writer of this passage doesn't mince any words about it. But what happens next is the natural temptation for all of us. Because he was running from the problem, which was one group of people, but he still had another group of people around him who could offer mutual support. But look what he does as we continue in this verse. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life, and when he came to Beersheba in Judah, he did what? He left his servant there. He left his servant right there. He left whatever sense of community he had left, and in our lives, we are tempted in moments of self-pity to kind of wallow and abandon all sense of community. It's in those moments that even the people who might be for us and with us and alongside of us, when we get in these moments of self-pity and isolation, we want to push even them away. And that's what Elijah starts with. He knows that he didn't have the community around him of Queen Jezebel. He gets that, but he had this other community that he just wants to forget. He wants to abandon, and so he leaves them behind. And I think we have the same experiences. We're successful, we're confident, we're certain of something that we need to do. And then all of a sudden, in the midst of our strong decisions, in the midst of our confident decisions with our family or our school or our job or whatever it is, we start to get a little uncertain because we get a little pushback. And we get a little pushback, then the fear starts to come in, and we start experiencing the failure, and we experience fatigue, and we start to burn out in the middle of these situations. And finally, when fear takes over, we choose to isolate. We choose to separate from everyone around us. They may not even be the people who are involved in this situation. I love this, and I've had this experience many times where I'll find myself in one community where I'm upset or facing challenges, and all of a sudden, I want to push back against my family. Anybody ever had this experience? I don't want to be around them. I just want to be myself. My family doesn't have anything to do with it, right? This community over here has nothing to do with that situation, but for some reason, the natural pull of human beings is to isolate from everyone in the midst of this conflict. And so now our question, is it just me, or becomes a statement? I'm the only one. I'm the only one, aren't I? Like, you don't care. You don't really care about the things I'm fighting for. You don't care to fight for our family anymore. I'm the only one who's out here fighting for our marriage. I'm the only one who's out here fighting for the future of our children. I'm the only one who's out here fighting for a better organization to make sure that we all have a better future. I'm the only one standing up here. Nobody else is getting up and doing this. And that's exhausting. It's exhausting in a whole lot of ways. And when we're exhausted, we don't have the energy for anything, much less the energy for somebody else. So we isolate from everybody. But here's the truth. Isolation will naturally lead to devastation. We keep going with Elijah's story. We see this because he very quickly isolates. And then the next verse we see, he wants to die. In verse 4, it goes on, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, he came to a broom bush. He sat down under it, and he prayed that he might die. I've had enough, he says. I've had enough, Lord. Take my life from me. I'm no better than any of my ancestors in the past. Just get rid of this. And when he reaches this all-time low, it's in the middle of that moment that we start to see the real solution to his problem start to emerge. It's in this moment when he's sitting underneath the broom tree, and as he's resting there and he's saying, I don't want to live anymore, I don't want to go on anymore, I've isolated myself, I just want to die. I mean, let's just be honest. If he really wanted to die, he could have stayed in Israel, couldn't he? He had a warrant out for his head. Like, he could have been dead within 24 hours. You want to die, Elijah? Just sit where you were. There's no reason to take a journey into the wilderness. But in the middle of this whole mess, he takes a journey into the wilderness and sits down in his isolation that's led to devastation, and now he wants to end it all. But in this moment, God reintroduces the solution. In verse 5, it says, then he lay down under the bush, and he fell asleep, and all at once an angel touched him. This angel touched him and said, get up and eat. It's in the middle of his isolation, and it's in the middle of his abandonment from community that community is actually reintroduced to him. The angel comes to him, and before the angel says anything, before the angel lays anything, the angel simply reaches out and makes contact with Elijah. And we discover that the most important thing that is to be told in this story is the fact that the angel came and met with him. That there was some sense of community reintroduced into this situation. And the angel doesn't just leave it there. The angel does say, get up, eat. Elijah gets up, he eats, he has all his good food, and then he goes back to sleep, and the angel comes again. And the angel comes back this second time once again to reintroduce community and to reinforce it. But when the angel comes again, the angel comforts him in this moment only to prepare him for another engagement with community. You see, a community should be something that comforts us. We should be able to press into community and find comfort. We should find that embrace that we're looking for. We should find that support that we need. But that's not the end of true community. And the angel, as it came to comfort Elijah on that day, was actually comforting Elijah to prepare Elijah for the second form of community, confrontation. Because true community both comforts and confronts. And Elijah's journey that day, it wasn't complete. his engagement with community wasn't over just with the angel. In fact, the angel comes and comforts Elijah with food to sustain him for the journey. But in the next verse, God confronts Elijah. He confronts him and persuades him to take the journey. Read it with me. Verse 9 goes on. It says, "The Lord appears to Elijah, and the word of the Lord came to him. 'What are you doing here, Elijah?'" What are you doing? This time, there's no words of comfort. There's no touch. There's nothing that's happening in this regard. Like, he's not there to coddle Elijah and to kind of pull him in. He's saying, what are you doing? Like, what is going on with you? And in this amazing moment, Elijah pushes back on him. He's like, you want to know what I'm doing? You want to know what I'm doing? God, here's what I'm doing. I've been extremely passionate and zealous for you, God. I've been extremely zealous for the Lord God Almighty. But the Israelites, all that group of people that you said were yours, that you promised would be great, they've rejected your covenant. They've torn down your altars. They put your prophets to death with the sword. And now, here's the phrase, right? It's no longer, is it just me? I'm the only one left. I'm it. The only one fighting for anything, God. Like, you had a group of people. They were supposed to be a community that were called out and that were special, but I'm it. I'm the only one who's fighting for this cause anymore. And now they're trying to kill me too. And I love what God does. In this moment, God says, look, just go back into the cave and wait, because I'm going to show up. I'm going to pass by. It's not the word of the Lord anymore. It's not just this God who's crying out from heavens at him. He says, I'm literally going to pass by, Elijah. You talk about how I'm true. You talk about how this reality of God is your innermost truth. I'm going to pass by and show you my truth. I'm going to pass by and be there for you. And so he comes by. And the scripture says that he comes by, and there was an earthquake, and there was a fire, and there was a wind, and all of these things you would think, oh, that's God, that's who he is. No. It wasn't that. It was this silent whisper that came by. And when Elijah heard that whisper, there was something inside of him that connected with him. And the scripture says he actually came out of the cave. Like, he stays in hiding for the wind and the earthquake and the fire and all of those things that we would naturally assume, oh, that's God, that's this big, bold God. Elijah stays put. When he hears the whisper, Elijah makes his way out of the cave. He says, that's God that I know. Right? God takes the first step to reintroduce Elijah to that courageous moment. That moment where he would say, yes, that is the real God. And what I love about this story is he jumps back. He goes, okay, now that you've been reintroduced to the moment of courage that you once had that stood in the face of 450 prophets who disagreed with you and said, this is the real God. Like, now that you've got that courage back, Elijah, what are you doing here? And Elijah doesn't seem to get the point. He repeats himself. He goes all over the same thing that he just said. He says, I've been very zealous, God. And you've got a people back in Israel who have rejected your covenants. They've torn down your altars. They've put your prophets to death. And now I'm the only one left. And God can't stand it anymore. Like, he breaks out. He's like, look, we're not dealing with this. He's like, you can wallow in self-pity all you want. You can assume that you're... He's like, God, Elijah, I just proved to you that I'm real. I just walked by you. You connected me in a real deep way, and now you're still in fear. He goes, let me point out, Elijah, there's a community that you abandoned. In fact, he tells him very directly in verse 15, the Lord said to him, go back the way you came. Don't go back a different way. Go back the way you came. Because the way you came, the way you journeyed out and abandoned all of community, you walked right past people who were with me as you came. You walked past each and every one. Go back the way you came. Go back through the desert of Damascus. And when you get there, I hope you'll find this guy by the name of Hazael. And I want you to anoint him king over Aram. Why do I want you to anoint him? Because he's my anointed. He's with me. He won't bow down to any other god. So I want you to anoint Hazael. And keep going, Elijah, because you're going to pass somebody else. And I know you don't think that this guy has anything to do with me, but I want you to anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel. You don't even know him, do you? You would never connect with him. Like, that wouldn't be your first go-to guy. But I want you to anoint him. And I don't want you to stop there. I want you to also anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat from Abel Mehaloah, to succeed you as prophet. I want you to go to all these guys. Why? Because these guys are already with me. They're right by my side. You've skipped right past them as you've gone. And just to kind of let you know that they're with me, he gets really kind of brutal here. He goes, You'll know that they're with me because Jehu will put to death any who escape the sword of Hazael, and Elijah will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. They're on my side. Like, they've got your back. They're not going to let you die. And you walked right past every single one of them. And just to kind of put the final nail in the coffin, God goes on and says, and yet I've reserved 7,000 more in Israel, all whose knee have not bowed to Baal, whose mouths have not kissed him. Elijah, you thought you were alone? I just pointed 7,003 individuals out to you who you walked right by. You're not alone. You're not alone. You're in the middle of this isolation in this moment where you've been courageous, but now you've led to isolation and abandonment, and that's leading you to devastation. But I want to remind you, Elijah, there's a group of people around you who got your back. You're not alone. You just need someone who can confront you with the truth in your life to say, Elijah, press on. You do need the comfort. I get it, Elijah. You wouldn't have made the journey that you're on if you didn't have the comfort. But you need someone in your life, Elijah, who will confront you with the truth. Yes, you need community for comfort, but you need community, a community that cares enough about you to confront you when you're lying to yourself. That's what you need, Elijah. And God says, but you got to trust me. And that's where it all starts for us. Trust. Trust is especially important whenever you've got a community that both comforts and confronts. It's hard to believe, and I'm with you, it's hard to believe that a community who confronts us really has our best interest in mind. It's hard to believe that a community that challenges our ideas, our commitments, can really be for us. It's hard to believe that a community that confronts us with a different view of reality can be good for us. But community at its best does both of these things. It comforts and confronts, and we can trust that. When our communities are only grounded in comfort, we're held together by things like shared interests and our disdain for other people, but we're not held together by love. We're held together by something that kind of we all like, but when we get together, we look at all the people who are not like us, and we kind of shame them. But a real community, a community that both comforts and confronts, is a community that's connected by love, irregardless of shared interests. Within this group, there's no choice to be made to whether or not you're going to be loyal to yourself or be loyal to the group. That's not a question to have. There's no pressure to fit in or to conform to the model that's set within these types of communities. Within this group, people actually have more freedom to be themselves without fear of being cast out, because you're no longer bound together by just these shared interests. You're bound together by something much greater than that. And that's the problem that I see in most of our understandings of community in America. Our community and our sense of community in America just has continued to function like a giant feedback loop. It just rolls back in on us, things that we already believe, things that we're already comfortable with. We've sorted ourselves out into like-minded people groups so that ultimately we only hear our own thoughts coming back at us. Depending on the things that we watch, the things that we listen to, the things that we read, it's always just feedback loops kind of supporting what we already believe in. And our sense of community in these moments actually looks more like a giant me walking around. It's like, oh, you kind of remind me of me. I like to hang out with you. And that's not community. That's not a community that both comforts and confronts. In these settings, we only consume facts that support our beliefs. We only hear our own thoughts being proclaimed. We only listen to these voices. And we silence all the other voices that would disagree. But this isn't true community that gives strength and courage. The communities that are found in Scripture are communities that both comfort and confront. They confront our presuppositions. They confront our own biases. They confront our own thoughts and our own thinking. But it takes a great deal of trust to live in these communities. It all starts with trust. You have to trust. When you're confronted with difference, we have to trust. When we're challenged, we have to trust. We have to trust that we are all about something bigger than us. And that's risky. But I love, there's a guy by the name of Charles Feltman who wrote a book on trust, and he said that it's risky because of this. He said, trust is choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. We kind of let it go. We let those things that we value, we place it in someone's hands, and we say, I'm going to make that vulnerable to you. Vulnerable meaning that idea that it is wounded. It can be open to wounding. The truth is this. Christians have opened themselves up to this type of trust for centuries. This is one of the beautiful things of our gathering together with one another. In times gone by, in ancient centuries ago, people would rush in. Ancient Christians would rush into villages where the plague was taking over. Why? Because they trusted the community. They trusted them. They weren't holding hands with them all the time. They weren't going to church with them. But they loved the community, and they held together with the community. So when everyone else in those towns was running out, Christians were running in. For centuries, Christians have come together in spaces like this and walked around the room at key moments in time to share the peace. What does that look like? Shaking hands with strangers. Engaging with people who you normally would not engage with, but being in community together. For centuries, people have come to altars like these and knelt beside people who they would never kneel beside. They would never become vulnerable with, but they kneel beside strangers in spaces like this, because they believe in the power of community. For centuries, we do the things that gross people out today. We eat and drink from the same cup. I don't care if you are family. That's disgusting, right? But we do it not with just family. We do it with strangers. We eat and drink from this common cup because we believe so powerfully in a community that embodies not just similarity and shared interests, but difference. And what's amazing about the Christian faith is that through baptism, through the single act of baptism, we're able to call strangers family. We're able to call someone a brother or a sister not because they share our blood, but because they share our common bond of love. And in that, we held unity. And today, little Harper is sitting in the back, getting ready for baptism. There are going to be times where this community is called upon to comfort her. There are going to be times where we have to be there because life is difficult for her. But there are equally as many times where we are called upon to confront her with the lies that lie before her and that she's committed to believing. There are times where we are going to disagree with her and look different from her. But as a community, through baptism, we call strangers family. And we unite around that principle, around that shared interest. Little Harper doesn't know and may not ever remember what happens on this day. But today, we make a commitment the same way that thousands and thousands of Christians before us have done to say, you are my sister, Harper. And through Christ, no matter how different we may be, our community is held together by that common bond.